Whether it's a hot time in Florida or a rainy night in Georgia.
Looking for trouble?
It's the perfect time for the TCBCast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast.
Oh, yes, sir. Good to see you open up. Just glad fix to bring you the hottest thing in the country. Real hot and blue. Coming to WHBQ in Memphis, Tennessee.
With your hosts, Justin Gosman and Gurdip Ladar. The TCBcast is on the air.
Welcome to TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis Presley fan podcast. I'm Justin Gosman.
I'm Gurdip Ladar.
Gurdip, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing well. How are you doing? You just had your Thanksgiving.
Yes, we just had Thanksgiving here in the States. Thanksgiving went really well, and of course, all the Black Friday stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, we're recording after my Black Friday rush. And I just, Elvis news-wise, really quick, I just wanted to point out, I saw a couple Elvis things on Black Friday.
Oh, what'd you see?
So there are two movie box sets that I saw that are out on store shelves at the Walmarts. Apparently,
like new or
no? Well, the packaging is new, but they're of older movies. One of them is the Paramount movies,
right?
Barring Loving You, which obviously Paramount still doesn't own, and then the other one is, I think, MGM movies, but not all of them. But it's a pretty chunky set. And, so apparently the success of the Baz Luhrmann movie probably cued some of these companies in that own the rights to Elvis's movies that, hey, people are going to maybe want to buy these for the holidays. So I was pleasantly surprised to see some Elvis movie box sets out on the store shelves.
Now, these are DVDs?
Yeah, they're DVDs. So they're not Blu-rays. Not Blu-rays. They're just DVDs.
Wait, let's put these out, these old format that hardly anyone buys.
There's still a lot of DVDs out there. A lot of people still watch them. So, I mean, most people use digital, though. Let's be real.
I wonder how many people actually still watch and purchase DVDs.
Oh, I'm sure there are still people that do. So, let's see. What else is going on? Oh, did you listen? Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, the soundtrack won the American Music Award, I think, which is crowd voted. That won the award for favorite soundtrack of 2022. And in a thank you Instagram post that Baz posted, he teased a little sample that we hadn't heard before of the Viva Las Vegas Toxic remix.
Las Vegas with a neon flashing, wild bandits crashing, all those hopes down the drain.
Yeah, I mean, we heard a little bit of it.
Well, obviously in the movie,
film.
But the bit that he plays in the clip is a part that we've never heard before.
Right. I mean, it's kind of hard still to judge it just by those little clips.
Oh, yeah, and this was 10 seconds.
I want to hear the whole thing, and then I can kind of, judge and criticize like I'm apt to do. But I'm always up for Elvis remixes, whether they be good or bad. It's just nice to hear. So I wonder what this means. Like, how would he release it? Is it going to be like that "Can't Help Falling in Love" thing, where they kind of released it just for like one little track, or
Ronson one? Yeah,
I think he has more up his sleeve. Maybe a volume 2 of the soundtrack.
I mean, maybe there are certainly things that we know that weren't on the soundtrack that were in the movie, like Austin's version of Blue Suede Shoes.
Sure,
and obviously a proper version of I'll Fly Away as used in the movie. So, and I'm sure that they recorded a proper version of that. So, it'll be interesting to see what else is in the pipeline. And we haven't heard any news about when the score soundtrack will be coming, Elliot Wheeler's instrumental score. So,
right. Are you into that or no?
I am totally into that. I can't wait to get that. But
really?
Yes. Yeah. So it's all the interpretations of Elvis's, the melodies and Edge of Reality and Cotton Candy Land and all that. So I'm excited for that. So that's a thing. Let's see. What else? Any other Elvis news over the last week or so that you saw?
Not really. I think I told you I got that Tarantino, his new book.
Yeah.
What was it called again? Cinema Speculation. And he talks a little bit about Elvis in, I think, I can't remember what, chapter 2, maybe 3. Just about, the 60 stars and how if Elvis actually had better management, he could have been a pretty big action star, like one of these guys, like Paul Newman or those types, Steve McQueen. He said he could have been much better than if he had someone looking out for him and looking out for the types of films he was making. I mean, this is stuff that we all know. Like,
sure.
Because Elvis movies didn't lose money, so why change up the formula? It's stuff that we all know, but probably people who are into films or reading this book, they might not realize it. But it's just a good affirmation that someone like Tarantino thinks that Elvis could have been even greater than he was.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously Tarantino's been a huge Elvis fan going way, way, way back. I mean, he even in his script for True Romance, obviously, has huge references for Elvis.
That's right. I think Pulp Fiction and a couple of them had that in there. So, I mean,
weirdly though, I don't think he's ever done a film that actually has Elvis music in it.
No. That's too much on the nose, I guess.
Yeah.
He also talks about Don Siegel a bit, also about the films he made, like Dirty Harry. But he talks about Flaming Star, and it's almost like half a chapter on Don Siegel himself, just himself. But
cool.
he gets into Elvis.
Yeah.
And stuff.
No, I can definitely see an influence of Don Siegel's filmmaking on Tarantino. That's for damn sure.
Tarantino doesn't usually
Dirty Harry and stuff.
He doesn't directly reference stuff he likes all the time. Like, he's a huge Marvel fan, but recently, there's stories that he's saying that a lot of the Marvel actors aren't really movie stars. The character is the movie star, and a lot of people got up in arms. So I'm like, yeah, I can see that.
I mean, the role is the bigger thing. I mean, that's clearly obvious in the way that they've swapped out some of the characters over the 10, 12, however many years that this has been going, 14, however many out we're now.
And people are up in arms saying, oh, he's dissing Marvel films. But all he's saying is he just hates the fact that this only Marvel films are making money. And he just wishes that there was more variety. But he's like, look, I read Marvel comics as a kid. I love this. If I was in my 20s and these were coming out, I'd be in heaven. But what are you going to do when you're older? Your tastes, change, and you don't want this to be the only thing in movie theaters. But what are you going to do? People, I mean, I think it's just the whole thing about streaming. People are going to watch films that are not these epics, and we've talked about these bombastic special effects laden films. Absolutely. They're going to go see those in the theater. If it's not that, they're going to see it at home. It just makes sense. It just makes sense and
especially when tickets to go see a movie now cost so much with the economics. I mean, they want something that's choosy. It's not going to be a risk, and that's it. The audiences don't want to risk. And therefore, the studios don't want to risk. And
you want to see something you can't really enjoy as much as home, as you would at home. If you can get it at home, then there's no point to going to the theater.
You can get character dramas all day long, on television.
There's a Netflix full of them.
Extremely well done character dramas, I'll add. It's not even a situation like it was, back in the 70s or 80s when TV was very clearly considered a lesser form compared to film. It wasn't, but there was definitely that belief. And certainly, obviously, they operated on lower budgets and things. But anyway, so going off on a tangent there. I think, I think that, things going well.
You want to take that again?
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know what
I'm winding down from this hustle. But so that's awesome. I'll have to check out that Tarantino book.
Yeah, cinema speculation. If you're into films in general, it's always good to hear his take on stuff.
Totally. So we do have a quick Patreon update. We had one new Patreon backer and 2 upgrades this week. Ethan Reading joined on our Patreon, so hopefully, Ethan, you're enjoying all the extra bonus content over there. And then Jai Riley and Mark Potter, both longtime patrons, just recently upped their backing on the Patreon. So very gracious. Thank you very much. We're extremely grateful for your support. So I'm glad that you're pleased with what we're doing.
Cool. Excellent.
So just quickly as an aside, trivia-wise, we're going to go ahead and skip that this week. Maybe let the bruising heal a little bit.
I texted you. I was like, "Yeah, it's okay. I can do without repeating my sorry exhibition from last week."
Now I will.
Although those questions were tough.
They were, and to be fair, patron and previous guest of the show, Darren Evans, let me know that he says, I think Gurdip was robbed on a trivia question about what song was sung at the Easy Go-Go in Easy Come, Easy Go. He called out that Elvis in that film sings both You Gotta Stop and I'll Take Love at the Club. And so I double-checked, and sure enough, he's right. And the card just has the wrong answer.
So I knew more than the card.
So the trivia card was wrong by way of omission. So, yeah, we're going to credit you 1 point and give you a week off of trivia.
Awesome. There you go. That's
Sounds like a
You know
plan.
what I need to do is I'm going to come up with questions and have Beck sit and see if she can answer any of them. I think not, but we'll see. We'll see.
So, yeah, this week we are going back to our Patreon backer well. They, as usual, get regular topics to vote upon a poll. There's a number of submissions that come through that the folks on the higher tiers, the first top 2 tiers, get to submit suggestions. They get voted upon by the community, and then whichever one wins is the topic that we pick. And I'm just going to say up front, I don't think this one's going to go the way that you folks think it's going to go. The topic that got voted upon, if you couldn't tell by the title of this episode, we're going to be talking very briefly about Elvis death conspiracies.
Man, there's a lot of unexplained phenomenon out there in the world. A lot of things people say, what the heck's going on? Let me tell ya. Who built the pyramids? Elvis! Who built Stonehenge? Elvis! Yeah, man, you see guys walking down the street pushing shopping carts, and you think they're talking to Allah? They're talking to themselves, man. No, they're talking to Elvis! 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 You know what's going on down the Bermuda Triangle? Down the Bermuda Triangle. Elvis needs boats. Elvis needs boats. Elvis, 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 Elvis needs boats.
So, Gurdip, what's your history with encountering Elvis death conspiracies?
I mean, those were rampant in the 80s. I remember that. It'd be like those cheapy Inside Edition. I can't remember. There was a bunch of those kind of shows that used to have the stories about Elvis is here, Elvis is there. Those National Enquirer type magazines, World News, they used to have his face plastered, or they'd have a picture of someone that someone took from far away, and like, oh my God, Elvis is in Kalamazoo. I always thought those things were kind of dumb. I was like, why? And then I remember Bill Bixby hosted like 2 specials.
Yeah, the Elvis Files and the Elvis Conspiracy. There were 2 full-length, like hour-long TV specials aired on network television, starring Bill Bixby.
I was like, why is he doing this? Why is the Hulk doing this? And not only like was he, a dignified actor, but he starred in films with Elvis.
He was in 2 movies with Elvis. He was in Speedway and Clambake.
I was like, why is he doing this? I mean, obviously it's cash, but still, I just didn't get it. I watched them just to get for shits and giggles, but it was like, wow, there's like reenactments and they're playing it all serious, like, oh, he was there, and I tried to follow him, and then right away there was these people that shuffled into a car and they took off. I'm like, oh my God, this is supposed to be like something like Unsolved Mysteries. I don't get it. I thought it was all silly, and I remember that Gail, what was her name? Somebody wrote a book.
Let's just call her Gail. I'm not going to give her the privilege of us saying her name on the show.
There was a book. And I remember
Is Elvis alive?
Yeah. I remember there was it had a tape with it. And I remember she was on like talk shows like Donahue or something. And
she was everywhere. She was on Oprah. She was on Larry King Live. She was all over the media all over the 80s, because she is the gal who wrote the book Orion, which came out in 1978, and according to her, was not based on Elvis Presley at all. It was about a star who fakes his death, like he's tired of of fame and wants to leave the life,
Right.
And so what ends up happening with the book Orion is that after it's published, the media starts picking up attention, and Elvis fans obviously start picking up that there's Elvis connections. And the biggest thing that happens is that Shelby Singleton of Sun Records fame, the much later iteration of Sun Records after Sam Phillips sold it, decides that he is going to basically steal the Orion concept from the author and actually create an act with a musician going out with sort of an Elvis sound-alike voice and slapping him in a mask and making people wonder whether or not it's really Elvis. And that's where we get the musician Orion, which the real name was Jimmy Ellis.
Yeah.
You don't kiss the way you used to. When you hold me, it's not as tight. There's been some talking in the city, but I found out the other night. Yeah, and it ain't no mystery. I can see it plain as day. Yeah, it ain't no mystery. Another man done took my place.
I think that her association with that, I think, really put me off on listening to Orion or taking this person seriously.
Yeah, and from what I understand, Singleton did not ask her permission. She was in no way whatsoever involved with the Orion musician, with Jimmy Ellis. And Jimmy Ellis, to be fair, like, he had been recording for Sun Records under his own name for a little while. Yeah. But they noticed that he certainly had a vocal resemblance naturally to Elvis, and then he played it up once he got that role. And it started actually with a record that Singleton had put out where he took a bunch of Jerry Lee Lewis tracks that were still in the archive and stripped off the vocals and on certain verses, and then had Jimmy Ellis overdub, and they put like Jerry Lee Lewis and friends. And even though it was just someone who wasn't even in the studio with Jerry Lee Lewis, but it made you think that Jerry Lee Lewis had recorded tracks with Elvis. So it was playing off this idea that Elvis was somehow still alive, or there were lost tapes that had surfaced.
Why was it called And Friends? Was there someone other than Ellis on them?
No, it was just Jimmy Ellis.
Why didn't he do something like Jerry Lee Lewis and His Highness? Just to totally
like just to fuck with people.
I'm gonna hold my baby as tight as I can. Tonight she'll know I'm a mighty, mighty man. I heard the news, everybody's rocking tonight. Oh yeah, come on now, let it rock. Rock, 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 shake, rock. Come on, baby. Yeah.
I wanted to just point out really quick that I did take a lot of time and I did a lot of research for this episode. I've actually got about 4 pages of research that I did in depth, and I even, when the subject was submitted, and I got to credit, Mark Potter actually was the one who suggested it, because he wanted to talk about how around the 10th anniversary of Elvis's death in 1987 was kind of when it almost reached its peak. And he says that, that we've talked about it before on the show, but he doesn't know how much newer fans really know about that period of ridiculousness and just how bad it was. And I can't do a better job than point you in the direction of ElvisInfonet.com, the fan site, has an extensive web page. It's ElvisInfonet.com /spotlight_DNA.html. And Nigel Patterson for Elvis Infonet has this extensively broke down timeline of when things happened in the Elvis conspiracy world. And he has dedicated so much time to cataloging all of this on Elvis Infonet that I couldn't even come close to like, I would just be replicating his work to even do that. So if folks want to learn more about the actual chronology of that, feel free to go in there. But essentially, the big thing that happened was, in terms of the book Orion and Orion the Singer coming out, the book that was published as a follow-up to Orion was a supposedly nonfiction book written by the author, and the title of it is Elvis Alive? And it basically purports that her book, Orion, was pulled from publication because it was hitting too close to home. And so she's going through and uncovering this conspiracy of why her book is being pulled from, store shops by the same publishing company who is publishing Is Elvis Alive?
Yeah.
So, of course, they're making money off the hype. They know that they can make money. And the big marketing push around Is Elvis Alive is that there was this cassette tape that was included with it that was reportedly a recording of Elvis talking after he had supposedly passed away, that he was in hiding. And as you mentioned, there were all these Elvis sightings. There was a woman who spotted him apparently in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and people started seeing him in television shows and in movies. There were rumors that he was in, like, Home Alone and Finding Graceland, and all these theories continued into the 90s and the 2000s. And I'm sad to say that I actually, for the sake of research for this episode, I actually bought a copy of Is Elvis Alive. I actually sourced a sealed, unopened copy of the book with the cassette tape to read.
I had this, by the way, back in the day.
Did you?
I think my sister got it. It's not something I would have bought, and I think she said it was really cheap, like $2 or something. Mm-hmm. And I put on the tape, and I was like, wow, this is dumb. This guy just... She just got some dude to sound like Elvis over the phone and pretending that he actually faked his death. And I haven't heard that tape in, like, since that day I got it and I listened to it, and I was just like, this is so dumb.
I'm not going to play a clip on this episode. It's out there on YouTube, but folks, you can go listen to it for yourselves.
Gonna play a clip.
I'm not even going to play a clip.
Ridiculous.
I'm not going to dignify this stupid tape.
What do you think that was? Who was that dude?
So this actually, again, credit to EIN for doing some of the extensive research behind this. And obviously there's a lot of other people involved, but there was an Elvis impersonator who came out in the later years, and he basically claimed that he was paid. The guy's name was David Darlock, and he confirmed apparently that to Geraldo Rivera that he was hired by an Elvis fan club to make a recording speaking like Elvis. And then what happened is that the author of Is Elvis Alive got a copy of the tape secondhand, and then just duplicated that for the book, is what the story was. From the LA Times, they have a report that dates some of this information back to 1988, when David Darlock came out and spoke out about being this fake Elvis voice.
Huh. Okay. Well, there you go. Mystery solved.
Yeah. And again, I think it's important in terms of because there are a lot of new Elvis fans who are coming onto the scene from Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, and all of a sudden they're faced with all of these, like, wait a minute, like, there's all these claims that Elvis is alive. What the hell? What were people really believing? In fact, even
still going on. Like, is that still happening?
Is it still happening? So, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, is that there are still Elvis conspiracies that are happening, and largely there are communities on YouTube, on Facebook, that are hugely impactful on really people believing the conspiracy that Elvis faked his death. Just for context, we get a good listener base, but we are not by any means a huge platform in the Elvis world. There's a Facebook page about Elvis Presley being alive and supposedly having evidence. The Facebook page has around 40,000 followers. And it still posts, like, nonstop information about the ongoing conspiracy theories. And throughout the 90s, there were new theories that came on. There was, like, a guy who published a book that was called The Truth About Elvis Presley in His Own Words, which claimed that Elvis had been living out his life under his brother's name, Jesse. And he claimed that he was receiving information and contacting Elvis and, like, treating him, I guess, medically from afar. And I think I mentioned this a couple years ago when I had a bunch of Elvis books donated to me. That was in that collection. And I was insistent that I was never going to hand that over. I will probably destroy that book when I'm done. Now that we are talking about it. But there's a whole group like back in the 90s that was called like the Presley Commission, and they were dead set on proving, like writing up a report on all of the theories and, all the weird coincidences that they saw that, oh, this must. And the big thing that like a lot of them talked about was like, Elvis's name is spelled wrong on his headstone at Graceland. The Aaron is spelled wrong.
Right.
But
know what that means, obviously.
Well,
he faked his death.
Clearly.
Oh, I saw Mr. Presley tiptoeing through the tulips in my backyard garden late last night. Oh, I saw Mr. Presley tiptoeing through the tulips with his guitar in his suit of white. I'm sure that it was him, my friend. I knew he'd keep in touch. He dropped his scarf when I gave it back. He said,
"Thank you very much."
I saw Mr. Presley tiptoeing through the tulips underneath the silvery moonlight.
And the goalposts have shifted so much in the Elvis conspiracy world that now they've gone on to harassing a Southern pastor by the name of Bob Joyce over claiming that he's Elvis Presley because he has a kind of vocal resemblance, but apparently he's an Elvis fan and his son is actually an Elvis impersonator, which is like prime evidence number one of the fact that the guy's not Elvis Presley. Like, no fucking Elvis Presley in reality would allow his son to be a fucking Elvis impersonator. Just stupid as fuck.
This seems to really anger you.
It does, and here's why. Here's why this angers me. Because conspiracy theories. What are your thoughts on conspiracy theories overall? Do you just think it's kind of a cute like thing that kind of happens on the side, and we're just laugh at it?
I mean, if they're harmless, I mean that's fine. But when you start like doing like weird stuff, like like I don't even want to go into it. It's just like the flat earthers and all these people that think that 9/11 was conspiracy. It's like, I guess you need a hobby. You need something to fill your time. It's just some people just can't accept stuff just at face value.
Yeah.
They think there's always some kind of underlying something. There's like something's not right with that. Anything that, like COVID example, there was how many conspiracy theories of COVID were there? And the fact that people are getting vaccinated and you don't know what's going into their body. And I'm not into conspiracy
the thing about conspiracy theory, because I went through a phase. Like we all, I think, go through a phase, at whatever age, usually like probably young, and for me it was when I was a young teenager, where you like get some conspiracy theories books and like UFOs and cryptozoology, and you're just like, oh, this is kind of funny.
That's what I mean. That's harmless. Like cryptozoology or Bigfoot or Sasquatch or Nessie. And, like that's fun. Like just fun stuff.
I saw Elvis in a UFO, sitting there with Howard Hughes. I saw Elvis in a UFO, Jimmy Hoffa was in there too. I saw Elvis in a UFO, singing in rhythm and blues. And Liberace was there, and he had on a pair of Imelda Marco shoes.
But the thing about why theories happen is that they take, and why they spread so prominently, especially big ones like Elvis being alive, or that JFK, there was a bigger conspiracy around John F. Kennedy's assassination, or things like that, the grassy knoll or whatever. But what they do, like the COVID thing, conspiracy theories take the grains of doubt that some people have in institutions and in truth and start to ask questions. And so let me pose an example. Like if you were told that, oh, hey, do you believe the government has secret programs that they don't tell anybody about. What, do you believe that?
I'm sure there is some stuff that's not.
No, historically we know
Yeah.
that there are operations that are kept secret. That's just how the government works. Like that's just how the military works. But because you have an understanding of that, the question then is, do you trust the government? Do you trust what the media says about the government? Well, if you don't trust that, well, how can you trust anything else?
Right.
And then it slowly turns into, well, I'm just asking questions
Anarchy.
about, there's not, they're arguing for evidence that isn't there. The absence of evidence is evidence for a lot of conspiracy theorists. Sure. And then it really is a lot of it's the power of suggestion combined with whatever beliefs, bias, susceptibility the recipient has inherently to them. And really how gullible they are, if we're honest. And it's sad to say, like, there are a lot of really genuinely smart people that can also fall for conspiracy theories. But I was jigging up some information, and I was trolling through all these, conspiracy theory Facebook groups just to see where the tone is nowadays. And it would not surprise you, I can imagine, that a lot of them are pushing a lot of conspiracy theories about January 6th, about COVID, about things like that. There was a documentary. There was a mockumentary done in 2012, and it was called Elvis Found Alive. And it's clearly like a mockery, like it's a mockumentary, like it's poking fun at, the conspiracy theories. But it's presented, if you watch the film, as sort of self-serious. Yeah. And so naturally, Elvis conspiracy theorists latched onto that as proof that this theory was real. And then, crazily enough, if you actually look up the filmmaker, he has shifted from making mockumentaries, because he also did one on like is Paul McCartney dead?
Yep.
Like conspiracy theory. And nowadays,
playing a record backwards or something.
He's making full conspiracy theories about like the threat of Islamic Jihad, and one about how Obama is a Marxist threat to America. One that the Trayvon Martin shooting was a hoax. There's money in conspiracy theories.
Yep. And
there are a lot of grifters that will try to get your money by playing off your fears and suspicions of institutions and of truth. And so there's a lot of gullible fans out there, and there are literally tens of thousands strong on social media that clearly believe this stuff. And there's rabbit holes you can go down on YouTube of videos of people saying, this is Elvis secretly, and here's a blurry photo where he was standing in the back room at Graceland, on a day that he was clearly taken after he died. Or, they're just always moving the goalposts of what's acceptable evidence. And there's a book, an author, Patrick Lacey, who did an Elvis Decoded book where he tries to go through and actually debunk a lot of these conspiracy theories. And he's sort of like the go-to guy for the media to debunk Elvis conspiracy theories because he's published a book on it. But honestly, the problem with trying to debunk Elvis conspiracy theories is that in order to explain them, or really explain how prevalent they are, you have to engage with them and try to understand them and explain, like, oh, these are the leaps in logic that people made. And the problem is that, like, you're giving that misinformation a platform when you do that. And as I was doing research for this episode, I just realized that I can't do that anymore. And I appreciate that our patrons wanted to hear us talk about Elvis conspiracy theories and maybe poke fun at it. But all it really did, like, again, literally, I bought Is Elvis Alive? And I read through it, and all it did was remind me just how gross and dehumanizing tabloid media and social media are. And, you have all those tabloids and at grocery stores, and the reason why, to me, and correct me if you feel differently, I think the reason why people believe conspiracy theories about Elvis being dead is because they related so profoundly to the idea of who they thought Elvis was, that he was this mythical hero, and they couldn't believe that he had been brought low so easily. Sure. Sure. And the idea that I'm going to get into the weird symbolism of this here, but Elvis succeeded in a system that was meant to make the American dream seem possible. He is lifted up as like the prime example of you can come from poverty and grow to fame, success, be known all over the world. Like, he confirms that idea that the system is inherently built in such a way to work for anyone, but they don't realize that that system still actually failed him, and it continued to exploit him even after he died. And the sad truth is that Elvis didn't want to escape the trappings of fame. Even when he was sick, exhausted, tired, his money and his wealth and his fame enabled him to be, you know, however you want to call it, generous or wasteful with his money, you know, helping his friends and family and strangers, like, which then created a cycle where he had to work more to make more money. And he got caught up in that cycle, and it destroyed him. And Elvis was a smart guy. You know, I don't think we say that enough on this show. Like, you know, I think just inherently know that, but I think we have to credit him. A lot of people will depict him as a really stupid Southern guy who just got lucky. But he was a really sharp, intelligent man, but he was not smart enough to escape the life. Because if he had had the foresight and the means to perfectly execute the conspiracy theories that have been raised about his death, he would have just fixed his fucking career.
Right. I just think these theories about Elvis being alive is twofold. One, it fed the people that didn't want to believe he had passed away. Mm-hmm. Just the fans in general, like the ones who were like, he's not dead. No, he can't be dead.
They wanted it to be true.
The ones that are passed out in front of Graceland. You've seen all the footage.
Sure.
Those people. And then on top of that, it intrigued the people that are just all about conspiracies. They're like, wow, this guy faked his death. FBI's behind it. What's going on? So that there's a combination, a dangerous combination of the fans and these people who are just into conspiracies, and they ate this stuff up. That's your audience right there. And I was neither of those things. So yeah. I was like, yeah, no, I don't think so. And this is not gonna, I guess when I was asking you, like, is there still stuff? Yeah, I guess they really can't end, because they'll be like, well, Elvis is alive, but he did fake his death and he did live out his remaining years here, and this is the evidence. And so it doesn't even matter if enough time will pass where Elvis can't be alive, they'll still have conspiracies that he did live on past 77.
Exactly. They'll move the goalpost to, well, he's clearly dead. You get to like 125 years and it's like, okay, well, clearly he's not alive anymore. But like, he clearly lived past, 1977 because of XYZ thing, and he must have died, in the 90s or the 2000s or the 2010s or whenever they want to claim that he died.
And then they'll talk about how he lived his life and what he did during those missing years. Elvis, the missing years.
Yeah. I mean, and that's how in pop culture that got turned into, it got conflated into the stereotype of the Elvis image because it was so prominent. I mean, there were so many sitcoms in the 90s that had Elvis is alive like plots. I mean, we did one on our commentaries for Patreon where we talked about like Alf believing that Elvis was alive, you know? Yeah. And Bubba Hotep is another one that we've talked about. We did a review on the main show.
It's a cultural shorthand for a quick joke.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's a mockery of, and it's a distraction from talking about not only Elvis Presley, but all of the actual history around him and all the important people who influenced him. And I just wanted to point out before we pivot here that a lot of the people that we have brought up on the show over the last 5 years that we have grown to really care and appreciate and love their music, we don't even have graves that we can go visit, let alone argue the spelling on their grave markers.
Right.
Jimmy Breedlove, we did an episode. I could not find valid information on where Jimmy Breedlove is buried because all of the information about him out there is conflated with information about another white man of the same name that just has the same James Breedlove or Jimmy Breedlove, and I could not find enough information to say.
Let the stars fade and fall, and I won't care at all as long as I have you. Every kiss brings a thrill,
and I know that it will, as long as I have you.
Bill Kenny of the Ink Spots, who was a huge influence on Elvis Presley. He died in New Westminster, BC. He lived in Vancouver the last 25 years of his life.
Crazy.
But we don't know where he's buried.
When you find your sweetheart in the arms of a friend, that's when your heartaches begin. When dreams of a lifetime must come to an end.
Right. I'll go find him.
Good luck. Nobody knows. I covered Rudy Richardson's song Fool's Hall of Fame, which Elvis performed in concert. He died in 1958 of alcohol poisoning in a boarding house in Nashville. I can't find any information indicating where he's buried. All we have is a couple photos and a half dozen songs.
Well, if I live to be 100, I won't forget the day I broke the heart you gave me and let you walk away. That's when they hung my name in the Fool's Hall of Fame.
Little Junior Parker, who did Mystery Train. If you wanted to go see and visit his grave, you couldn't do it. He died in 1971, and I found a 2019 article from the Clarksdale, Mississippi Press Register that one of his cousins was down in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where little Junior Parker grew up, and realized that the Delta Blues Museum down there didn't have any information on him, like any exhibits or anything. And so she actually arranged with the family to start having some little Junior Parker stuff donated and began organizing a tour for the family and the community. But I've gone through and they sort of sidestep the fact, like they talk about, how that on this tour it ends at the cemetery where the majority of Parker's family was buried, but he actually is not buried there. We don't know where little Junior Parker is actually buried, or if he is buried there. If he is, he's not, with a marked grave.
Train I ride, 16 coaches long. Train I ride, 16 coaches long. Well, that long black train carried my baby from home.
Can I ask you something as an aside?
Yeah.
Do people visit graves of famous people?
All the time.
Really?
All
it doesn't
the
seem like
time.
something I would ever do.
Yeah. I mean, Graceland.
I know that's another reason why I'm not like, oh my God, I got to get to Graceland.
Yeah.
I was like, why do I want to see someone whose music I really enjoy, to see them buried somewhere? I was that's just kind
It's a
of,
thing.
I don't know.
Do. People feel so.
If you're into it, then,
strongly-
pay respects. But I'm not into that. Like, I guess that's why in our religion we cremate. So whenever you want to think of somebody, you think of somebody. You don't have to actually go to a designated spot for it.
Yeah. Esquerita, who influenced Little Richard. We do know roughly where he's buried, but we don't know for sure because he's buried in an unmarked grave on Hart Island in New York, along with hundreds of other victims of the AIDS epidemic from the 80s.
Lord, don't nobody know ya. Oh, they don't need you when you're down and out. In your pocket you don't have one penny. And all of my friends, you know that I don't have any Lord. Oh, but let you get up on your feet again. Here they all come, they talking about me, your long lost friend. Very strange, without a doubt. Can't nobody use you when you're down.
And another person, we know where we can find the grave, but she's shamefully buried with two other individuals, Big Mama Thornton. She's buried in a pauper's grave with Cotella Williams and Kenny Barton. They just didn't have enough money. How is that just and righteous? Like, what did she do to deserve such an undignified resting place? And no, harm meant to the people she's resting with. But I dug up some information that there's a Denver-based musician, Erica Brown, who's looking at a project of having possibly, Big Mama Thornton, reburied somewhere else. But the problem is that they don't know who actually owns the plot for the grave, because people feel like she deserves her own, grave and a marker and something historically like recognizing her as important to the history of rock and roll and to the history of blues music. And there are so many challenges because they don't even know who owns the grave or what the status is.
Oh, Lord, I know you did now. Oh, the thing it is already. Oh, Lord, I want you to know I shall be released. I know I'm gonna be released. I want you to listen.
And I was struck looking at all these conspiracy theories and just realizing how disproportionate the media attention has been on Elvis death conspiracies over the last 45 years since Elvis died, compared to the hundreds of people whose careers touched Elvis's in some way, or his lives, their lives touched Elvis's in some ways. And I just can't bring myself to do it, anymore. And I hope that the rest of you, if you want to have fun with it, that's fine. It's a cute thing, but I just think there are enough Elvis conspiracy theories out there that the people who are still pushing it, they're all pushing the new conspiracy theories as well. You are going to find yourself falling down into a rabbit hole of other dangerous conspiracy theories that are also untrue. And that's dangerous. It's not funny anymore. And I think we have to say Elvis conspiracy theories need to die. Yeah. So in light of that, we're going to pivot and we're going to celebrate the music. And so we're going to talk about a Billboard episode. We're just going to pivot and talk about some R&B charts from 1953.
There you go. There.
So
great topic that you guys picked, but we're not really into it.
Yeah.
We did talk about it.
We did. We want to make sure that you feel like you understand that we know what we're talking about. I regret that I know as much as I do about all this stuff.
Hey, we gave it the college try.
Yeah. So, instead, we're going to talk about the R&B charts from December 26, 1953, the last chart of 1953 that was published in 53.
You picked this. Why'd you pick this one?
I picked it because it's Christmas time, and this was, I guess you could say, the last Christmas that Elvis had before he was famous.
I thought you were going to say, the last Christmas you gave me your heart. The very next year you...
I honestly, I didn't even really want to tie this one to Elvis in any way. I just want to talk about some great music.
We still have Elvis ties here.
Oh, yes. Oh, tons. And we're going to do this in reverse. We're going to start at number 1 and work our way down. Okay. Right off the top, what do we got?
Money Honey, Clyde McPhatter and the Drifters, which seems like we've been talking about this song an awful lot.
Well, we just did Dorsey Brothers stage show where Elvis
and this was my song of the week, I think, as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, as I said before, it's not my favorite Clyde McPhatter and Drifters song, but obviously that's like saying, chocolate is better than caramel. It's like very good. They're still very, very good. You just have preferences.
She screamed and said, "What's wrong with you? From this day on, our romance is through." I said, "Tell me, baby, face to face, how could another man take my place?" She said, "Money, honey, money, honey, oh, money, honey, if you wanna get along with me."
but I love the swing nature of the song. And it's not really classic doo-wop, but like the Drifters doo-wop.
It's a lot bluesier.
Yeah, it has a lot of the tropes, but yeah, it is, as you said, bluesier. I like the song. It's a great song. But what did you say about this song? Because we've just talked about this song.
Yeah, I mean, this was your song of the week back on episode 238, and
Right.
yeah, and obviously us talking about it on the Dorsey Brothers stage show. The more I listen to it, the more I just am astounded at what a talent Clyde McPhatter was.
Just now.
Like, I know.
Where were you 5 years ago?
But every time I hear his voice, I'm just struck by how immense that guy was.
Yeah. I think he's underrated. I mean, if you're into this kind of music, you know him, but general audience, I don't think so.
Absolutely. What do you have at number 2?
Honey Hush, Big Joe Turner.
Well, you keep on jabbering, talking about this and that. Well, you keep on jabbering, talking about this and that. I got news for you, baby. You ain't nothing but an alley cat. Turn off the waterworks, baby. They don't move me no more. Turn off the waterworks, baby. That don't move me no more. When I leave this time, I ain't coming back no more. Honey hush.
I love Big Joe. Strangely, I can't remember hearing this before. Obviously, I probably have, but it probably just never stood out. It's a great song, though. Follows closely with his other songs during this time period. It has that shake, rattle, roll, flip, flop, and fly feel.
Which is funny because this predates those.
Yeah.
This is 53, and it's almost like people heard Honey Hush and were like, more of that, please.
Yes, please, more. More, sir.
That classic 12-bar blues, very close to Shake, Rattle, and Roll and Flip, Flop, and Fly in terms of the way it's structured. And then I wonder if you caught the pop culture reference at the end of the song.
I did not. What was it?
Hi-Yo Silver.
Ah, the Lone Ranger.
As the Lone Ranger. It was popular at the time. Yeah.
Singing hi-yo, hi-yo, silver. Hi-yo, silver. Say hi-yo, hi-yo, silver. Hi-yo, silver. Say hi-yo, silver.
Next, I Had a Notion, Joe Morris Orchestra with Al Savage. Now, this is interesting. I remember hearing this back in the day, like early 90s, on one of those doo-wop R&B compilations that I had tons of. But I don't know why. I just never revisited it, like, ever again. It's just, I don't know, because this is great. It's very doo-wop-ish, even though there's no backup vocalist, I believe. Is there?
No, there's really not. It almost it treads this very fine line between like the doo-wop side, but also like sort of that what we would later know from like Chuck Willis, where like you could stroll to this.
Yeah,
it's right on that threshold, and it's fantastic.
Last night I had a notion. Jumped into the ocean, but my baby came along and convinced me I was wrong.
This is a great song. I had to add this to my playlist because this is one of those songs I heard it a few times early on, and then I just forgot. I don't know why. It's just weird, but great to revisit it. I'm glad.
I tried digging up. I could not find any information on Al Savage whatsoever. He worked with Joe Morris's orchestra for a while as a vocalist, but I shamefully could not find much in the way of information about him.
Little known
But
fact.
he's pretty good.
He changed his name to Randy and wrestled in the 80s for the WWF. A lot of people don't know that, but had to uncover it.
That's your conspiracy theory.
That's my conspiracy. Next is a song that obviously we both know and love, Rags to Riches, The Dominoes. What do you think? I'll give you the
Jackie Wilson. I mean, say no more.
Yeah.
I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only
pocket may be empty, I'd be a millionaire.
Like, this is just, I mean, and clearly hugely influential on Elvis, because obviously he would go on to record this in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, really, like, I'm speechless. Like, it's Jackie Wilson, like, at his Jackie Wilsonist.
Yeah. It's just, I was like, again, this is one of those songs, like, everybody, how do you discuss without gushing just all over it? It's just those vocals, it's like, you can feel this dude's emotions captured perfectly on wax. And that last line he delivers, like, my fate is all up to you. It's like brilliant. Even his re-recordings, I don't think they matched this original one, right?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. And even Elvis can't touch this.
I'll say it's interesting that you have the Drifters and the Dominoes in pretty strong competition, because you would imagine, like, you lose your lead vocalist, like, it's over. Like, because how do you top Clyde McPhatter? Like, well, here's how: you get Jackie Wilson.
I know.
Like,
coached by Clyde McPhatter.
Yeah, coached by Clyde McPhatter, and like, I mean, it was the perfect storm to have them, competing with each other. And I'm sure, obviously Clyde was, pulling for the Drifters, but you can imagine him also being proud of his, former colleagues.
Right.
Just sharing in the success.
And meanwhile, Billy Ward's like, yeah, I'm so great. I made this happen. All right, next. I'll Be True, Faye Adams.
I'll be true to you. I'll be true to you. I'll be true to you. No matter what you do, don't tell me about your troubles, 'cause I've got troubles too. Just call me honey, honey, and I'll be true to you. Don't ever try to fool me, 'cause I know what to do. Just treat me kind and tender, and I'll be true to you.
I don't think we've talked much about Faye Adams in the past, have we?
Need to. No, she was discovered by Ruth Brown.
Because she gives me Ruth Brown vibes.
And Ruth Brown brought her to Joe Morris after his previous lead singer left his band to go solo. And so he was like, well, I'm going to make sure that she doesn't leave, so I'm going to foster her solo career from the outset. And so what you end up happening is that on this song, you have the Joe Morris Orchestra backing Faye Adams. So Joe Morris is on this chart at the number 3 spot and the number 5 spot. And as we'll get to, there's another one on here too. But this is incredible, and it eventually went to a number 1 on the R&B chart.
It's a really good song. I just love this gruff, rough style that just demands you listen up and pay attention. Like her saying, I'll be true to you, isn't so much as a comment, but a demand. And I love the clapping. It harkens back to that gospel style, which I'm sure she had this upbringing with.
Have you ever heard the Bill Haley version?
I don't think I heard his.
Yeah, it's it's not his worst recording, but it definitely doesn't come close to Faye Adams. That's for sure.
Right.
So,
well, she's next in the charts.
Well,
too,
that's the thing too. And again, Joe Morris Orchestra, because this is literally the A side and the B side together.
Right. And this is a song everybody knows, or
yeah.
at least Elvis fans. Shake a hand. What do you think of this?
Oh, this is fantastic. Faye Adams just knocking this out of the park. And of course, like, this was a number 1 R&B hit for her for like 9 or 10 weeks in 1953. Like, it was just a crazy successful song. And then Laverne Baker would go on to have another top 20 hit with it, which we've talked about before when we did an episode on Laverne Baker.
Right.
So this is like, clearly this song has a lot of great like gospel influence on it. And yeah, I've always loved this.
Shake a hand, shake a hand. Shake a hand, shake a hand. Shake a hand, shake a hand.
And honestly, how do you think this stacks up compared to, how do you think Elvis's version stacks up compared?
Yeah, like first it started off kind of slow for me, but when she gets into the chorus, that's where it really picks up. Like her voice is so great on it, and I might prefer hers more than Elvis's, even though I do like Elvis's version.
I mean, it's on the Today album, which is quickly rising in the ranks as, an album that I think we need to talk about, do a review on soon.
Sure.
But, of all the songs on there, because I know that you're not a big fan of Elvis's 70s country stuff, this is maybe the least country song on that album.
Right.
So
I just wish he didn't turn to country in the 70s, but
sure.
What are you going to do? I wish he went the other way and went more like R&B blues.
Totally. Number 7, we got Amos Milburn and his Aladdin Chicken Shackers doing one scotch, one bourbon, one beer.
Please, Mr. Bartender, listen here. I ain't here for trouble and have no fear. One scotch, one bourbon, one beer. I don't want soda, no bubble gum. You got what I want, just serve me some. Since my baby's been gone, everything's lost. I'm on this kick and I can't get off.
When I first read the name initially, I was like, this doesn't sound like anything I've heard before, but damn, I've heard this. Although I don't know where. This is great. Like, it bounces along nicely.
Yeah.
I love Milburn's like low key vocals. Like, even though the tune has a familiar tone to it, I just don't know why. Maybe it was like the John Lee Hooker version I heard, but this original is like, wow. I love this so much. I added this to my playlist.
Wow.
This is one of the reasons I love doing these episodes. It's like finding great new old songs.
Yeah. No, this was one of his more successful songs, but he had gotten popular. Amos Milburn had gotten popular doing songs basically about drinking alcohol. That was he was sort of considered, not in a negative way, but he was sort of a novelty act. Like, here comes Amos Milburn again with another alcohol song, because he had Thinking and Drinking, and he had Bad Whiskey, and there was just a whole bunch. And then the reason why I thought it was hilarious that when you look on the label that they're credited as the Aladdin Chicken Shackers, that's in reference to a fact that they had also been backing him on his song The Chicken Shack Boogie, which had been a hit back in 1949. So they just sort of what a strange name, Chicken Shackers. But yeah, this is fantastic. This is incredible.
Marie, the Four Tunes. This is another example of a song I never heard, but damn, how great is this? It's not even doo-wop. It's just a great vocal like group rocking out to amazing song. To me, it picks up around the 1 minute mark where he just goes, oh my Marie, and then the clapping kicks in and he starts rolling his tongue like Jackie Wilson.
Tears will fall as you recall, and all is splendor, your lips so very tender, the word will you surrender to me, my little Marie.
Well, Marie, the dawn is breaking. Oh, you'll soon be waking to find a heart aching.
Very much like Rate Petite, like the way that Jackie rolls.
They got me there. I love this. And when they start on the falsettos, I'm like, God damn, this is some good shit.
Yeah. I'm surprised that you didn't know that much about the four tones.
No.
So
did I call them the tunes? I think it was the tones.
Yeah, four tunes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I may have misspoke
Okay.
there. Yeah, Four Tunes. They were founded in part by Deke Wilson, one of the founding members of the Ink Spots. He had a personality disagreement with Bill Kenny, so he left because Bill Kenny basically bought out his stake in the Ink Spots. And so then Deke Watson started up a group called the Brown Dots. Well, apparently Deke Watson didn't get along with any of his fellow singers in the Brown Dots either, because they kicked him out. And then instead of dropping the Four Dots name, they formed another group called the Sentimentalists. And then Tommy Dorsey stepped in because he had a female vocal group that had been around since the 1930s that he had called the Sentimentalists. And so he said, please change your name. And so they changed it over to the Four Tunes, and that's how they got their name. But this is essentially a spin-off group from the Ink Spots, really.
Nice.
So, and you can hear that. Like, you can tell that there's just, it's almost like, imagine if the Ink Spots were doing rock and roll.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you can imagine them recording in like the late 50s if they had been shifting their music more toward that style. Totally.
I'm going to ask my wife tonight if I can refer to our family as the Brown Dots. We'll see how that goes over. Number 9, Something's Wrong, Fats Domino. I've heard this before, probably on that Rhino box that I had from the 90s. You can't go wrong with Fats during this time. I mean, any time during the 50s and early 60s, you really can't go wrong with a Fats Domino song. I love the piano, the vocals, and I like how he rides the beat. Did you hear this, and what do you think?
I mean, he's the king of rock and roll, so...
There you go. I wouldn't give that title to anybody, really, actually.
Yeah.
Even though
same. I just, I like throwing that back out there every once in a while.
According to Elvis, the king of rock and roll.
Is this the way it had to be? Why such bad luck fall on me? What can I say? What can I do when something wrong with you? I had my heart in your hand. You broke my heart, ain't that a shame?
And there's a lyrical connection in here because you broke my heart, ain't that a shame?
Yeah.
So
right.
Obviously, and it's a shame, obviously. So it ties back around. But obviously, this is coming, pre his like true rock and roll high bar, which would come, more 56, 57. But he was out there. He was beating the streets and kicking ass and taking names back in the early 50s too, including on the next song on the list.
Yeah. Speaking of Ain't That a Shame, we got Ain't It a Shame by Lloyd Price. So what do you know about this?
Yeah, this is fantastic. Fats Domino is actually playing piano on this. He's back in Lloyd Price. You can
He
tell.
played him on Lottie Miss Clyde as well. He played with him.
You can tell. Very much so. And Lloyd sounds fantastic on this. I had never heard this before at all. And I was, I need to do a Lloyd Price deep dive here pretty soon, I think.
And it's a shame when I think of the life I live. And it's a shame when I think of the life I live. Well, I may be too late, but I have only one life to give.
I had a couple of his compilations, so I'm pretty sure I heard these before, but I just like his voice. It just conveys so much emotion. Like, no wonder I love Lottie Miss Clyde so much. It's just I don't know. The dude's really underrated, and it's criminally underrated.
I mean, and he had been out there for a while, but he would not have crossover success until Stagger Lee, really. Which,
That's right.
And then obviously
Personality.
Lottie Miss Claudie, and but same. I mean, he was a steady worker out there on the scene in the R&B field, and he just didn't have the same sort of crossover success, even Fats Domino, had some success. Obviously we know some of the big hits like I'm Walking and Ain't That a Shame, but they just, it's a shame that I don't hear a lot of these type songs. That's why I love doing these Billboard songs too, is because like we know the big hits that are like the ones that show up on oldies compilations, but there are a lot of these songs that like charted in the top 20 or just at the lower end of the top 10 that I don't think get as much attention. And I'm glad that we're going back to take a look at these.
That's why I would purchase compilations from artists, because I never got those kind of songs if I just got a general compilation. They would just be the hits. And I wanted the deep cuts,
Yeah, that's great. Speaking of a Lloyd Price deep dive, I actually I was inspired by this song, I started looking up some information on Lloyd Price, and I got curious. There's actually a book that he put out in 2015 that's a series of autobiographical essays, and they're largely, he doesn't talk as much in depth about his career, although it obviously naturally comes up throughout the course of the entire book. But it's largely on the subject of his experience as a black man and, on the issue of race. And it's called Some Dumb Honky, SUMDUMHONKY. It's available for a ridiculously inexpensive price. I got it for $3 on Kindle. You can get the paperback for $15 in the U.S. anyway. But I actually started reading through it, and I think he is an incredible writer. It's a shame that I had not really heard that much about this book, because I listening to Fats Domino doing Something's Wrong and Ain't It a Shame, I went back to Andrew Hickey's episodes on Lloyd Price and on Fats Domino, and I saw that Andrew had recommended this book from Lloyd Price. And I as I was digging through it, I actually found something kind of interesting. And he actually does talk a little bit about Elvis in here. And there's the paragraph, he says, 3 years after I hit, so in the mid-50s, there was a kid named Elvis Presley from Tupelo, Mississippi. The press was so excited, it seemed like they had discovered something that would cure cancer. In reality, they were excited about something that had been done. In reality, they were excited about something that had already been done in many forms. It was no secret they didn't want, N-words, to own that music. Elvis just shook his leg and that was good enough. The only difference between the press Elvis and I got was race. He even kind of sounded like us. It wasn't Elvis's fault, but you couldn't keep the press away. I hold nothing but good in my heart for Elvis Presley, but these white guys who head the press will eventually meet their maker. I'm just making a point about how biased the American press was and is. And I thought
Scathing indictment
by Mr. Lloyd Price, Mr. Lottie Miss Claudia himself. But I wanted to bring that up because I was searching through the book, obviously just reading his essays, but I got curious about, if he did mention Elvis, and he did. And he had some, a very kind thing to say about Elvis Presley while also criticizing the systems around Elvis. And it happened to resonate with me specifically because we were talking about Elvis conspiracy theories and the direction that I had kind of been leaning in Elvis conspiracy theories and things I'd been thinking about. And then he goes on to talk about Elvis later in another part of another essay, and something got brought to my attention here that I was shocked by. That, I guess, shocked is maybe not the right word, because it's not surprising, but I was just disappointed to learn that it's still happening. He's just talking really about the discrepancy between Elvis and how little attention the songwriters get by comparison.
Right.
And he says, Elvis has been dead longer than the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has been open, but if the world didn't know he was dead, and from the radio play he still gets, and the marketing and promotion of his name, you'd think he was just around the corner doing a movie. While the families of the creators of the music, the artists and songwriters, can't find burial money for their dead husbands and fathers, here come little companies who call themselves royalty lenders. These companies somehow have inside knowledge and know the conditions of these families. They wait around like flying vultures over their loved ones' graves, knowing that their heirs don't have a clue. These companies know that most of these children of artists and songwriters are brainless when it comes to the music business, so they wave a loan check like bait in the water. The family, of course, steps into the pit. Not knowing that the show is a business, these bandits take advantage of them. They lie and cheat the families out of their rightfully earned income and rights to the music. These bastards are more than manipulators. They're monsters in these families' worst nightmares. What they do is a crime, and something should be done about it. To be fair, this happens to families of songwriters of every color. And as I was sitting there reading through this, and it just hit me that we're doing this and we're talking about, the Elvis death conspiracies, and how the contrast of how much attention has been paid over the years to, the people, like, again, going back to the author of Is Elvis Alive, she's been on Oprah. She's been on Larry King Live. She was on, recently, 2018, I think, there was an article where she was still interviewed saying that she still thought Elvis was alive. And it's just, there's so much attention paid to that. And I found, 2 or 3 articles about royalty lenders. And it's a real thing. And the problem is that the only like articles that I found were basically in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. Rolling Stone has one where they talk about financial companies offering quote unquote alternate royalty options, where basically the lenders go through and they offer an advance of money against what they expect the songwriter's gonna like earn in royalties, and they get the money faster than a traditional financial institution would, like a bank. And so that's why they try to encourage people to go with them because, well, it's a high interest rate, but we can get you the money faster. So if you have a time crucial thing that you need the money for, we can get it to you. The problem is that the article that Rolling Stone did doesn't talk about what happens if your songs don't make the money back, or the family, like, again, as Lloyd Price talks about in this 2015 essay, 5 years before this Rolling Stone article, if the family gets approached and they don't have the money to pay for, say, a funeral or a grave for a songwriter, if they take out this loan from this royalty lending company and they can't pay it back, they don't say in the article what happens, what the terms are, but you can imagine they probably ain't getting the royalties back. And they probably aren't getting, like, they're probably signing away rights. And I was just struck by, these are blatant, like, literally in, like legal, broad daylight, you know, exploitation of people and their families from these grifters. And, you know, it's not a conspiracy. It's all legal, but it's exploitation nonetheless. And it's a shame.
It's no wonder that they're offering these to these families, because they're like, well, if they can't pay it back, we can own these royalties, and we can make way much more afterwards. It's horrible. I hate the music. It just makes you sad. I think Andrew Hickey talks about that as much. It's just the music industry is just full of horrible people. What are you going to do?
And would it not surprise you that during the pandemic, and especially over the last 2 years, they've really been targeting rap and hip hop artists,
right?
You know, and up and coming, you know, hip hop artists. And to be fair to Rolling Stone, they do have a quote from the senior vice president of artist and repertoire at Warner Chappell, and he actually does note that, like, hey, maybe the best thing to do is to actually go through, you know, a proper, trusted legal, you know, financial institution, rather than going through, you know, these high interest loan companies. But again, if you're the artist, maybe you know that. But as Lloyd Price talked about, if you're the family of the artist and that artist doesn't have that conversation with you, and you know, and his children or his, you know, his inheritors, you know, things could go bad. And so I just wanted to take this time to give a PSA, you know, just really quickly at the end of this conspiracy theory episode, that we talk a lot about the music that we love from this era, but we talk a lot about the songwriters, and we don't want to see the songwriters and their families exploited. So I hope that getting this information out into the world will do some good in the way that the Elvis conspiracy theories have not.
Excellent. Perfect way to bring it all back to conspiracy theories. All right.
So that's all over to Song of the Week.
Let's do it.
Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Elvis Presley. Well, get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans.
What a night. Ooh, what a night it was. It really was such a night. Well, when Monday comes, she's Tuesday. When Tuesday comes, she's Wednesday. I'm wearing the heart of Rome. He talked and talked, and I heard him say, I know that you've been told it's not fair to tease. It's the edge of reality.
All right, who wants to go first?
Does not matter. I can go first.
Sure.
These are songs picked by the Patreon.
Yes, indeedy.
So I got Ain't That Loving You Baby from 1958 or 64. Just depends on when you first heard it.
I could ride around the world in an old ox cart and never let another girl thrill my heart. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you?
I would have picked this myself. I just, never got to it, but I'm glad I'm getting to it now. Written by Clyde Otis, one of Elvis's favorite singers, Ivory Joe Hunter. We've talked about both of these two in the past, but Otis wrote a bunch of hits, not just for Elvis, but for people like Brooke Benton, Aretha Franklin, Charlie Rich, Johnny Mathis, stuff like It's Just a Matter of Time, The Stroll, which you talked about earlier, Baby You Got What It Takes, and then for Elvis, Don't You Think It's Time, and Any Way You Want Me. Of course, Ivory Joe, not only a prolific writer, but also a great artist. I think Since I Met You Baby and I Almost Lost My Mind are two of my favorites. And he also wrote My Wish Came True for Elvis, which I think we both agreed. Mm-hmm. It was okay, but I think he was trying too hard to get it right, no?
Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Now, strangely, Clyde Otis tells a story. I think this was in Life of Music or another book I read, where he tells a story that Freddie Beanstalk was desperate to get singles material for Elvis before he went to Germany, and called Otis and Hunter, and they had apparently all both gone duck hunting. Probably not the NES version, but probably real duck hunting. But they called him back and they said, sure, we got a song, even though apparently they didn't. And they quickly came up with and wrote Ain't That Loving You Baby. Now, the problem with the story is that Eddie Riff already recorded this song in 1956. So I'm thinking Otis probably got his timeline a bit confused. So that didn't make sense to me.
I could meet 100 girls, have loads of fun. My hugging and kissing belongs to just one. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Baby, ain't that loving you so?
Yeah, but I don't think I heard Riff's version before, but man, this sounds great. Like, he digs into the lyrics, almost playfully delivers the lines. I really like this. It's very bluesy, and that lead guitar is great. The pace is very similar to what Elvis would initially come up with, so I'm guessing there might have been that influence, and Elvis probably heard it. This could have been even the demo or what they brought to him just to, give it a listen. But as I said, Freddie Beanstalk and RCA were in a hurry to get some single material for Elvis before he was shipped out to Germany, and this was during his last session before that. Recorded June 10th, 1958 at RCA Studio B in Nashville. Now, as I said, they seem to have taken their cue from Riff, but this is a bit more country-ish. Maybe dancing that rockabilly line. It's a nice pace, and DJ and Buddy Harmon are great on drums here, but I don't know what's going on with the Jordanaires. They just seem really out of place. Like, I think they should have just sat down for this track because they really add nothing. Their backup vocals are really odd. Do you remember this? It's just, they're like, I'm like, what is going on here? They sound like farm animals.
I could ride around the world in an old ox cart and never let another girl thrill my heart. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you so? I could meet 100 girls and have loads of fun. My hugging and kissing belong.
It ain't one of their finest moments, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. I don't understand this. I can't remember where I first heard this. It could have been that Golden Records, but never left a huge impression on me. It was just okay. What did you think of this?
Yeah. No, I'm trying to think of where I would have first. I think most of the 50 stuff like this was probably the 50s master set. It's where I heard all these alternate, because they had both of the versions of it.
Sure, but I'm just talking about the one that was first released.
I think it was probably that same set. I didn't really have any of those compilations that early, so that's probably where I first heard it. So it was weird for me because I kind of experienced them together. Like, I didn't have a distinction between the two in my head.
Judge them both away. Yeah,
I could just kind of judge them together like, oh, these are just two approaches to the same song. I didn't really have it as like this chronological thing in my head at the time. So yeah.
Right. So they did 4 takes of this mid-tempo version, with 4 being the master. Take 1 isn't too different from the master. Take 2 is a long false start where Elvis messes up the lyrics and then just laughs. Take 3 is a false start with the intro messed up. So after they got that master, for some reason they decided to switch the tempo and go faster. I don't know why they did that. They were just like, hey, let's do something different with this. Why not? Let's try it. We got time. So take 5, Elvis tells Chet Atkins to boogie, which he does, but it's a false start as Elvis gets lost. Take 6 is a long false start, but man, that drum beat, so good. Again, they lose their place. Maybe it's too fast.
Take 2 WB 3255, take 6.
I could ride around the world in an old ox cart and never let another girl through my heart. I just loving you, baby. Hey, just loving you, baby. Hey, just loving you, baby. Hey, just loving you so.
Take 7 is incomplete. We only have like 56 seconds of it, but man, right away I'm like, wow, this is the way to take the song. Take 8 is another long false start, and Elvis starts talking about a frog in the lyrics, and then he just breaks up laughing. It's very, very odd.
I'm putting on my Sunday suit and I'm going downtown, but I'll be kissing your lips before the frog comes down.
Take 9 breaks up pretty quick. Elvis seems again to get lost, and both take 10 and 11 are incomplete, so I don't know what happened there. And that was it. We never got a master at all, which doesn't make sense to me. Like, this is the way to take the song, like totally different from the OG and like 1,000 times better than what they came up with. I love Elvis's vocals here. Like, he's rocking that, like rocking over that beat, and those drums are freaking great. Like, you want to rock out. What do you think about this fast version?
Oh, this is really fun. I love how hard hitting the drums are. Like, this is great. Yeah, love it.
I don't see how you can hear both songs and be like, well, let's release this one.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess I can kind of see, maybe.
No, you can't see.
Yeah.
Because they didn't release either of them. They're like, forget it.
Well, I mean, by the time you get around to 65.
64.
Or 64, yeah. I can see why maybe they were trying to go for, like, well, maybe this will fit better in the 60s.
A few years.
Well, yeah, but like in the terms of like what else was out there musically, like it was skewing more pop oriented, and whereas the much more up-tempo one is far more hard rocking oriented, very 50s rock.
Yeah, that's horrible. I released it in the 50s. Anyway, they shelved both, so I don't know what, but yeah, the mid-tempo one was finally released as a single with Ask Me on September 20th.
Yeah.
What?
So inexplicable.
Yeah, in September 22nd of 64, while Beatlemania is at its height. They're like, let's put out this slow version. That'll get them. Yeah, anyway, picking this up, people would be like, well, this doesn't sound like the current Elvis. What's going on here? But anyway, it reached number 16 on the Billboard charts and later was thrown on Golden Records Volume 4. Then later in March of 85, they released the fast version of Ain't That Loving You on that Reconsider Baby album, which contained a lot of those bluesy Elvis songs. And to get this released, they kind of Frankenstein the various takes they had to make the master. They spliced takes 1, 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Oh my God.
And then this version actually has a proper ending because the reason I say that is when I got Essential Elvis Volume 3 and then later I got the complete 50s master that you talked about, they include the fast version, but it just ends like just like in the sessions it did.
Yeah.
There was no real ending. And I didn't know about the Reconsider Baby album at that time. And I've said in the past, I used to listen to this local college radio here, and they would play obscure stuff from the 50s and 60s. And they played Ain't That Lovin' You Baby, the fast version, but it had an ending on it. It didn't just peter out. And I was like, what? Where did they get this? And I tried calling them, but they never picked up. So I was just like racking my brain, like, how did this happen? This does not compute. I was just, what's going on? What magic is this?
Putting on my coat and I'm going downtown, but I'll be kissing your lips before the sun goes down. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you so?
So finally, much later, I got that Reconsider Baby album. I'm like, there it is. Conspiracy theory solved. Yeah, the frustrations and lamentations of a young Gurdip Ladar right there. Brought to you by a very indignant young Ladar. But yeah, that's what that happened. A couple of covers. In '64, Ricky Henderson and the Beatmen, who they sound like a cover band, recorded a version, and it's essentially Elvis's version of the song. And I was just like, what's the point of this? I don't get Ricky or his Beatmen.
Me and 100 girls have loads of fun. A hugging and a kissing belong to just one. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you so?
In '66, a psychedelic band from New Zealand recorded their version. This isn't too bad. At least they're like trying to do their own thing, kinda, which I can appreciate. But it's not very psychedelic, though. I do like the opening drums; those are kind of interesting.
Riding around the world in an old ox cart, and never let another girl a piece of my heart. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you so?
And finally, Wanda Jackson recorded a version in 2006. It's all right. This is later day Jackson, so her voice isn't as high as it was in the 50s, but it's not too bad. The musical accompaniment is really good, and she's kind of doing her own Elvis thing, so it's not too bad. It's kind of neat hearing her now.
Like an alley cat, I give them all to you and never take one back. Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you, baby? Ain't that loving you so?
So, but yeah, that's my song of the week. And thanks to Tiffany for suggesting Ain't That Loving You, Baby. I'm glad that Tiffany was able to pick it, because I'm sure I would have got to it eventually, because I really like this song, especially that fast version.
Absolutely.
Anyway, what do you got? What did you get?
The song that got picked for me from 1970, Bridge Over Troubled Water.
And the pain is all around, yeah, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down, like a bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down.
Ooh, nice. Love this song, too. Two great songs.
Oh boy, yeah. Paul Simon writing "Bridge Over Troubled Water." Simon of course, Simon and Garfunkel, which was the first duo to record it. Obviously, they released their version back in 1970 as well, January 26, 1970, and quickly just blew the doors down. The song and the subsequent album, Bridge Over Troubled Water, became massive, like, all-time greatest hits. Bridge Over Troubled Water, the album, in fact, was at the time the best-selling album of all time for a while there, and is frequently ranked amongst, like, one of the greatest, like, all-time albums. What do you know of Simon and Garfunkel? They're people that we haven't, like, had, like, crossover onto our show very much. But they were obviously very prominent in the 1960s.
Yeah, I remember I had a few of their compilations. My favorite song of theirs is Celia. I love that song. I can listen to that all day. I just, and I like the Sound of Silence, obviously.
Yeah, Sound of Silence,
but,
and Mrs. Robinson. And
yeah, I'll get to which version I prefer more, but go on.
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously Simon and Garfunkel, they had gotten together as young men. Originally, as a duo, they called themselves Tom and Jerry.
Weird.
Originally.
Why did they?
Yeah, and then
did they get into legal troubles?
No, I don't think so. I think they just realized that maybe it would
Let's
be
not
better
be cat and mice.
Yeah, didn't want to be seen as novelty acts, I guess. But yeah, so they ended up getting a deal with Columbia Records with Clive Davis, and they ended up recording a number of successful albums and singles in the mid to late 60s. They had a relatively short career together because they ended up not really getting along super well. And in fact, they split up in 1970, not too long after Bridge Over Troubled Water came out.
I'm on your side. Oh, when times get rough and friends just can't be found, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me down.
What do you think of the original Simon & Garfunkel version of Bridge Over Troubled Water?
I have to admit, I heard Elvis's version first. So anything I heard after would be judged against that. And I think their version is fine. I just don't think they put the emotion I wanted from this song on their version like Elvis does. Call me like one of those homers that, go for the artist that I really enjoy. But I just can't separate the way Elvis sang it to this, because when you see him perform Bridge Over Troubled Water, you're like, wow. And then hearing this, you're like, I like it. I just need a little bit more. What do you think about theirs?
No, theirs is really great. Like, I understand why it was a hit. Like, their version is genuinely good. It's just that there are two other versions that are also fantastic as well.
Since I already gave my preference, what do you think?
My preferrals?
Your preference between their version and Elvis.
Elvis, Aretha, and then Simon and Garfunkel. Like, those are the three. Like, those are the versions of Bridge Over Troubled Water.
What's your Justin Gosman?
In that order.
Version?
Elvis, Aretha.
Oh, okay, that's the order.
Simon and Garfunkel, yeah.
Yeah. And I forgot to mention Aretha. Hers is also really good.
And obviously, like Paul Simon, he was hugely influenced by rhythm and blues and rock and roll in the 1950s when he was young. Elvis was an influence on him, and inspired him to pick up a guitar. And so he took influence from gospel music, and specifically black gospel music, when writing Bridge Over Troubled Water, and implemented that into the song. And weirdly, he originally intended it to have Art Garfunkel record it and be the vocalist on there. And instead, he kind of had to have his arm twisted to sing it himself. And so he ended up basically taking the song that he had written and then sort of expanding it out with some additional lyrics. And that last verse about the Sail on Silver Girl, that is actually semi-autobiographical in relation to his wife at the time. And it was that she, I guess, had concerns about starting to have gray hairs.
Right.
So that was just like sort of a charming little nickname that he had for her. Oh. And so that got incorporated into the lyrics. But
was coloring your hair not a thing?
I mean, it was. Like, clearly, like Elvis dyed his hair too. Exactly. But it's, I mean, in the image-obsessed world, that's something that a lot of people struggle with, the changing of their hair color. Like, I mean,
but that's,
not you, but
that's a simple solution. Yeah, not me at all. But that's a simple solution, folks. Dye it. I mean, that's the
and a lot of
thing
people
you can do.
And a lot of people do dye their hair, which is fine.
Sure.
And some people don't. That's fine too.
Right.
But yeah, so that was, obviously an influence as well. But overall, like it's across the board, just about being there for someone, and like the singer's gonna, be that person's bridge over the struggles of their life,
right?
And that's all it is. Like that, it's the simplicity and the beauty of Bridge Over Troubled Water,
right?
Sail on, silver girl. Sail on by. Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on their way. See how they shine. Oh, if you need a friend.
I just love it. And of course, the Wrecking Crew.
Of course.
Just incredible musicality on the instrumental, on the original. But then we got to get around to Elvis Presley's. His studio version was recorded June 5th, 1970. So again, just to point out, the song came out in January and Elvis was recording it in June. It had popped out. It was such a huge success, and he latched onto it right away. And there's a handful of takes that have surfaced, not the full session, but we have a rehearsal. We have take 1, take 2, take 5, and take 8 available to us. A lot of them are available on that From Elvis in Nashville set that came out a couple years ago. The rehearsal is kind of interesting because they actually take it faster, and they're just kind of doing the tail end of it, but it has like kind of a country bouncy feel to it. Like, it's totally different. And Elvis, by the end of it, he laughs and he's like, I don't know, we better not.
Yeah.
Bridge over troubled water. I will lay me down. I don't know. We better not.
But take 1 is a full take. Take 2, you can hear David Briggs working through the piano part, but it's basically a false start. Take 5 is a full take, and throughout you can hear Charlie Hodge singing harmony with Elvis on these takes. On take 5, there's a point where Elvis's voice kind of misfires on the very last "I Will Ease Your Mind." Otherwise, it's a pretty solid take, but it kind of bungles that one line, so they have to throw that one away.
Bridge over troubled water. I will ease your mind like a bridge over troubled water. I will ease your mind.
And then take 8 was The Master, and The Master was overdubbed a number of times. There were some various band replacements done on June 9th, 1970. Backing vocalists added June 22nd, and then the day after that, Elvis actually came back in and did some additional vocal replacements and added himself harmonizing with himself on June 23rd, 1970. And then in October, they did one last little thing where they added some applause onto The Master to make it sound like it was actually recorded live, despite being recorded in the studio. So when you hear it as the last song on the album of That's the Way It Is, it sounds like it's one of the live tracks, even though it's not. What do you think about that choice?
Just to go with the album, I don't think it was a bad thing. I think it was fine. I love this version of the song. I think this is spectacular. Just, wow, incredible. Like, the first time I heard it was on this album. I was like, this is a great album.
Yeah.
It's just, one of these songs that never left my playlist, essentially.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic, fantastic performance. And I've talked about a number of times that on the Master version, in his vocal replacement, at the very end of the song, there's a line, there's a note, a single note. It's my favorite note that Elvis Presley ever sang on the bridge over troubled water. On the second,
that's right. You
it's
said
my
that.
favorite note that Elvis Presley ever sang. It just sends like goosebumps every time I hear it.
I will lead your mind like a bridge over troubled water. I will lead your
Just brilliant performance. And Elvis is bringing all of his heritage of gospel music to this. And it's amped up. Like, it is a full-on, like, choral sound behind him, the way that they add the overdubs. And that is obviously reflected in the live performance, which is, you know, almost identical to how the studio version ended up on the master. But it was first performed August 10th, 1970 at the opening show for that engagement, which was filmed for That's the Way It Is. Right. And, of course, it was performed on both shows, August 11th and the 12th, and at the dinner show on the 13th. Many of them filmed, all of them recorded, and he almost certainly performed it throughout the rest of that engagement as well. What do you think of the live performances of Bridge Over Troubled Water in the movie?
I don't know if I've heard that or got the soundtrack first. I'm thinking probably I saw it first. So
yeah, I think
yeah,
same.
it's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. I like the way he's lit too. It's just like a spotlight.
Yeah, it's very dramatic.
Yeah, it's great. It's excellent.
Mm-hmm. And he would also perform it basically every year from 1970 to 1977. He continued to perform this through the rest of his life. This song clearly meant a lot to him. And it's interesting. There's a quote from Paul Simon about the first time that he saw Elvis perform it live. He said, quote, when I first heard Elvis perform Bridge Over Troubled Water, it was unbelievable. I thought to myself, how the hell can I compete with that?
like a bridge over troubled water. I will ease your
Yeah.
Because
Bravo.
here's the thing. Numbers, you know, popularity is one thing, and, you know, online numbers are, you know, sometimes not the most trustworthy thing, you know, and not always reflective. You know, I mean, people listen to things on repeat or whatever. But if you search for Bridge Over Troubled Water on YouTube, just do this really quick, Gurdip.
Sure.
Sort by the most viewed versions of Bridge Over Troubled Water. And tell me what you find on YouTube currently.
Okay. So, and then sort by most viewed.
So yeah, just no artist
view count.
No artist or anything like that. But yeah, just view count. Bridge Over Troubled Water. What is the top result for Bridge Over Troubled Water?
Elvis.
That
Elvis,
is correct.
30 million views. Followed closely by Simon and Garfunkel.
Yeah, Elvis's version from That's the Way It Is bigger than Simon and Garfunkel's version of Bridge Over Troubled Water today. Is some of that obviously like repeats? Yes, of course. Like, we all go back and we revisit that performance. But that's how iconic this performance is. It's just absolutely incredible that he throws himself into this. Mm-hmm. And he continued to do so. I mean, 1972, he performed it at a number of shows for Elvis on tour. Hampton Roads, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, Greensboro, North Carolina, which is the version featured in the film.
I'm on your side. Old time gets rough, and friends just can't be found. Oh, like a bridge over troubled water, I will lay me
He performed it at Madison Square Garden on the Friday show in 1972, which was not professionally recorded, but there is an audience recording that does exist. There's a funny one that I'm sure you remember. Closing night, September 3rd, 1973. He starts singing the lyrics to Bridge Over Troubled Water over the intro of Suspicious Minds as a goof.
Yeah.
Ton of fun. Like, he's clearly, I mean, Closing Night was a weird show anyway. He's kind of in a silly mood, and obviously things are not well. The show obviously goes off the rails a few times, but he's having fun on that. Like, he's goofing.
When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I would dry them all. I am on your side, hot damn. Oh, and darling, your eyes, I would dry them all.
And he continued to perform it. I just quickly want to talk about, before I talk about the last version from Elvis, the If I Can Dream with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra version. What do you think of that?
I can't remember that. I think it was okay, though. I can't remember
it's
exactly.
One of the more solid, and it really fits the dynamic for what they were going for with that project.
Sail on, silver girl, sail on by. Your time has come to shine. All your dreams are on their way.
Just briefly, of course, as we mentioned, Aretha Franklin's cover from 1971. Yeah, Paul Simon, his quote on Aretha's that I found was, quote, "Her recording is brilliant. Maybe it's the best cover of any of my songs that anyone ever did. In this particular case, the Simon and Garfunkel record was just as beautiful, equally spiritual to the Aretha record, even though its roots really do come from black gospel." And then he credited Aretha for picking up on those roots and translating the song in such a way that made it even more relevant to black audiences especially, and then audiences overall as it grew in popularity over the years. She transforms it completely into a full-on gospel number, and it is just, I mean, she is, I hate the monarchical titles, but it's tough to like argue, like the Queen of Soul, like, yeah, she earns that for a pretty big reason. Like, she is just an incredible vocalist. And I highly recommend, if you are not familiar with Aretha Franklin's version of Bridge Over Troubled Water, do yourself a favor, stop listening to us, go listen, because it's incredible. Yeah, just real quickly, want to thank Lorenzo for suggesting Bridge Over Troubled Water. And then the last version that I wanted to talk about is, of course, Elvis Presley's version from his final concert in Indianapolis, Indiana. And when's the last time that you listened to the Indianapolis show?
I can't remember now. It's been a while.
It's been a long while for me, too. Like, I've clearly had to go through it for individual clips, for sometimes that we've been talking about live performances, but it'd been a while since I had revisited it, and it'd been even longer since I had last visited this specific performance of Bridge Over Troubled Water. Maybe it was just the fact that I was in a weird headspace. Maybe it was I was just feeling the right mood. But there's something about the way that he performs it on this show on June 26, 1977. And he's in a good mood. You can tell. He even jokes. He's like, when tears are in your eyes, I'll give you a scarf. And then the rest of the song, it's just, he sounds great. Like, he just sounds so good.
Right.
And not in an Unchained Melody, Rapid City, like, is he going to make it? Like, or not? And then he does. It's not like that. It's just he genuinely sounds good. And and maybe it's just that the recording is crappy and masks some of the flaws in the performance. And you know what? That's fine. I'm okay if that's the excuse that people want to use, that maybe. But I think this is just one of Elvis's, maybe his last, finest performance. Because his version of Hurt from that show, it's bombastic, but I don't think it's as good as his version of Troubled Water. This might be Elvis's last great performance. The last thing I want to say on his version is how could anyone hear this performance and not think that this is a man who loves doing this and wouldn't want to be around to perform for people?
You've been listening to the TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast. Justin Gosman and Gurdip Ladar have left the building.
Someone must have stomped on his head with those blue suede shoes.
Thank you and good night.